So, okay, so now we're gonna start the recording.
Yes, indeed. Saana Saarteinen. I'm not sure how to pronounce the name perfectly. You'll tell us how. But who is Saana Saarteinen?
31-year-old, wish I was still 30, 31-year-old from Finland, played paddle since approximately 2019. So for a few years, played tennis before paddle, compete mainly in Finland. Yeah, and Saana Saarteinen is the right pronunciation of mine.
Saarteinen.
Saarteinen,
Thank you.
yeah, it's a little difficult.
I knew it'd be a little roll here and there. And so you played tennis and you converted to paddle. What and why did you decide paddle is the game?
Well, paddle started growing quite a bit in Finland in like 2018, 2019. And my friend from tennis actually played first, or like kind of just went to hit with someone, and someone kind of scouted her from there and said, you should join a tournament. And that's when she then called me like, oh, somebody said we should go to, or I should like join a tournament to her. So she's like, then she decided to ask me. And that's how we ended up playing a tournament the first time. I think we practiced once before the first tournament we ever went to. And then from there, it was just, yeah, we just continued playing. And now it's like a lifestyle here for us.
It's a beautiful thing. But the transition, how do you spot, do you think, a good tennis adaptable paddle player?
Tennis adaptable paddle player. Do you mean like a tennis player that has now adapted paddle? Is that what you
mean? So in other words, you see a tennis player, you say, I think that tennis player would be good on a paddle court.
That's actually difficult. I guess someone who has like very good kind of feel to the ball, like strategic in certain ways on a tennis court. Obviously, a big serve, most likely. Good volleys are a big part. Yeah, I think, and someone who moves well. So you can kind of see some elements of the tennis side that will definitely like kind of then transform or turn like very good tennis elements into paddle elements. I think you could probably see those. But then again, it depends. It's a kind of a journey always for a tennis player, because you need to learn to let the ball go past you and all these kind of little things. So I guess, yeah, at the starting line, everyone is pretty kind of, we have all the same struggles. But then definitely someone who has a very kind of stable game, maybe in tennis, who has a big serve, good volleys. I think those kind of things, and moves well. So those definitely.
Are those characteristics of Sana?
It depends. I would say I was pretty kind of stable as a tennis player. I didn't have the best serve, definitely, but yeah, maybe the kind of consistency is probably one thing that I've taken from tennis to paddle. So.
And double-handed backhand?
Yes, double-handed backhand, which I do use on the paddle court too, from the baseline and the net sometimes. So that's something. Backhand was one of my best shots, so I kind of like to use it in paddle as well. The double-handed.
And you play on the right, which means that shots down the middle will be on your backhand.
Yes.
And do you use a double-handed backhand like on a return of serve? How do you use the double-handed backhand? I mean, I feel like on the left, there's more that angle you can, if you're right-handed, that gets you that cross court, and you can do the dipping shot with a little bit more spin on it. But from the right shot, what types of shots do you like to use double-handed backhand on?
If it's a return, I try not to go for the inside out. So that was a risky one, because it can definitely hit the sidewall, but usually the middle. So I try to get it to go to the feet in the middle, or then to the person on B side of the other. So on the left side, the other side of the net. So that's a pretty safe shot, like at the body or then to their backhand. So somewhere around there. You can go a little, I guess, or it's a little easier to implement on the B side. So the left-hand side, the double-handed backhand, but it does work on the A side too.
Yeah, what I'm interested in is looking at how to evolve from tennis into paddle, which is basically the struggle of so many people on the paddle court. But I'm also interested in seeing how the game's evolving at the pro level or at the highest levels. So as far as unwiring tennis and figuring out paddle, letting it go by, what tips or lessons have you learned that make that happen?
Well, I remember the struggle in the beginning, especially in the beginning. You don't want anything to go past you. So you're trying to trade like drive volleys, block every single ball. I think the first thing is to just kind of admit, okay, I'm going to be very bad at this to begin with. I need to let the ball go past me. And as soon as I kind of accept the fact that my level just has to go down for a moment, then it will start to like go up quite quickly as well, when you start to learn how to take the kind of wall aspect into play. So that's probably the biggest thing. Like, learn how to let the ball go past you, and from that then start building on your game. So that's probably the first and very important part as well, because it gives you a lot of time when you learn how to let the ball go past you, and you get a whole new kind of like world out of paddle.
It's amazing, isn't it? And yet, when you get in those struggle zones, like there's, you're in the back, and then the people in the net, and they're attacking you. It's very easy to resort back to the thing you know best, which is
Yes.
block or volley from the back. So let's go back to 2019 and your arrival to paddle. How did that happen? Did you do a lot of coaching? What was your route into becoming the player number one in Finland?
Yes, we had coaches, and I had a few different coaches to begin with. That was very important to kind of get that basic level and understanding of what paddle is, because you have this kind of mentality as a tennis player that you got to kill the ball right away when it comes to your volley. You're killing it. You're killing it with your smash, and usually those actually they kind of turn against you when you don't know how to play paddle properly, even at the net. So not only the baseline part to let the ball go past you, but at the net as well. Definitely the coaches helped a lot in the beginning because it gave me that baseline to then start to improve on. And I think then we practice a lot with men, so pretty good level men in Finland, and I think that has helped us a lot to improve our game. We like to play a lot of like practice matches to get that kind of match aspect going in practice as well, that we can then take to our matches. I think just consistently working on learning what paddle is in the beginning, then starting to competing every time that there is a tournament in Finland, especially. I think that has helped then get to where I am today. Definitely.
So, I mean, I've been playing paddle a long time, and mostly in sort of Hispanic countries, and there's a certain culture to the way it's played in a Marbella or in Madrid and so on, or Buenos Aires. What's the culture of paddle like in Finland? To what extent is it more like Finns playing paddle, or are they sort of Spanish-oriented style players?
I think every country actually has this kind of their own cultural style for paddle. I think we're getting more into the looking more like paddle players, because in the beginning it was very tennis like, and you could always see, okay, that person plays ice hockey, that person has played badminton, ping pong, all these different sports, volleyball. You can always kind of spot the players. Now I think it's more of a mesh, so people are learning paddle a little better. You can't maybe always identify who's been what before you kind of, or when you're on court with them. So I think the culture in the beginning was that all different kind of sports, so racket sports or sports that involved the ball, they kind of all came to paddle. And then there was kind of a mix of them, and you could always identify the kind of style. So I think that's definitely something that's now evolving. We have more juniors coming and players who play kind of international more as well, try to go overseas. We have people coming from overseas here sometimes as well. So I think that kind of also keeps teaching us how to become more Spanishy, I guess, or the places that play paddle the best, because there is definitely a different style there. And in Sweden, even they play a little differently. I think they're a little head with paddle compared to Finland. It was bigger there first, and then it came to Finland. So that you can kind of like distinguish the differences, I would say.
Mm.
Culture.
And the challenge, of course, when I mean I speak to a lot of pros out there, dominated by the Spaniards, the Argentinians and Brazilians, and the challenge is having enough competition at home when you're not in a paddle first kind of country to
Mhm.
up your score. And it's really interesting you talk about playing with men, because they will bring a bit more speed, a little bit more power. And that forces you to adapt and learn how to defend differently and get better lobs and stuff like that. So I think that's an interesting way. So tell us about you, because you have a full-time job.
Mhm.
And so how do you manage to play paddle and be number one with a full-time job?
Well, it's a balancing act, I would say. I think the best part about it, even though of course you work the full day and then you go to paddle, so your time is limited in that sense. But I think they work well together, because the whole day, if you're using your brain and you're kind of working, it's very nice to go and do some sports. I think it's healthy. It's good for everyone. So in that sense, it's good kind of a mix. Of course, then it depends on my work weeks. If I have to go to Helsinki a lot, for instance, if I travel between Tampere and Helsinki, that affects practice, but it is doable. And I think college tennis, because I played college tennis in the past, that was studying and tennis. I've always liked the combination of both. A little more intense with work, of course, because work takes the full day, as I mentioned. So in that sense, it does work, but you got to put in the work. You gotta kind of make sure that you practice enough and do the right things. Always give it your all on court if you can't make that many practices during that week. So I think those little things that you do, they do kind of then you need to make sure you have done them properly. And that then kind of brings the results.
So in the world of Saana, when she's out with friends and they say, "What do you do?" And yeah, I work and I play this thing called paddle. How often are people saying what?
A lot of people actually know paddle. So the paddle is pretty kind of known in Finland, I would say, these days. But of course, then people do always kind of want to know how much do you practice and all these things. When if they follow like my paddle and stuff, they're very interested in what I do and who do I practice with, where, and how the whole thing works. Because yeah, I think it's a interesting kind of situation to work full time and then still play paddle like at the kind of top level in the country. So
Do you follow the professional paddle tour?
I do follow it sometimes, not that often, but I do know the top players. We've actually played a few times against them. There was the WPT tournament here last year in August,
Right.
so we got to play against two of the players, and sometimes I see those players in the European Championships, for instance. So I do run into them from time to time and follow and they play. It's very nice to watch them because there's always these kind of new things you can learn from them and from what they do and how they play. So.
Well, so who do you like to watch? I mean, time is limited, so you can't watch internally, or do you just watch the clips?
I watch clips and I actually really like to watch paddle live. I think
Mm.
I love watching it live because once I think there was an exhibition match here a couple of years ago, and I sat for 5 hours with my friends. We were watching paddle, and I was like, "Am I really not getting bored?" Because from TV, it's not. I guess you don't get the kind of full on experience, but live, I definitely love watching it. Especially last year, I went one of the evenings. I'd already lost in the tournament, and I was watching, and I think I watched for like 3, 4, 5 hours in a row. And I really wanted to see Galan and LeBron that time. I never had seen them live, so that was a match that I watched as well, and tried to go every day because it was that much fun to watch it live. So I prefer the kind of live elements aspects to sports rather than watching it from TV.
And so so you play on the right,
Yes.
as I understand it. Who are the pros that you look at and you really want to analyze the most, or at least, or you just love watching the most?
Um, I think Delphi is a very interesting player from like the
Brea.
women's. Yeah, Delphi Brea. I think she's just an all-around very solid player. Like she just gets the job done. She doesn't make a lot of mistakes. She plays very strategically, I'd say, and is just like an all-around very good player. So she's definitely one interesting one. Then if there are lots of B players that I like to follow as well, or like look at what they do. Depends. Well, Brea of course plays with
Bea.
what's
Bea.
with okay, the
Bea.
names are so close.
Doesn't she play
Brea.
with Bea Gonzalez? Yeah.
Yes, Bea Gonzalez. And then what Bea does as well, because they're very different players. Again, she goes for more like the bigger shots and does all these kind of more fancy things on court. So it's super interesting to watch their kind of how they work together. And I do like watching. Well, now Galan and LeBron don't play together anymore, but when they did, I think that was very interesting because, especially on the men's side, there's so many like crazy things that happen on the court, like really cool points and stuff like that. So I like to follow that and just see how they do because they move all over the court. It's like they're all over the place. It's
It's a
and
dance. It's literally a dance.
it's a dance. So I think that's the like fun aspect of it because a lot of the time, especially in Finland, we don't have that kind of like moving around the court as much, like to the other side and being all over the place. A lot of the times they teach you that you move like together with your partner, which is
Mhm.
especially important in the beginning. And of course, depends what level you play at, what's like smart and wise to do. But then when you go out and you watch the pros, it's like, well, they're all over the place. They're like climbing the glass and the fence and everything. So I think that's kind of don't have any specific player who I like want to kind of like try to follow, but just the whole like the event of paddle when pros play, it's really cool to watch.
It is another level. I mean, it's the danger is to think that we might get anything close to any of that sort of the fantasy shots that they have.
Mm,
It's absolutely remarkable. So, one of the things I like to ask about is this notion of choosing your partner.
yes.
You obviously have your partner, and that's sort of set. It feels almost awkward if you have had a long-term partner. The idea of breaking up. But how do you choose a partner? What would you sort of advice do you give to people who are saying, how do you which partner to choose? Which side do you play on?
Hmm. I think the sides do play that kind of role in it. If you're an A player, then you should go look for a B player. But of course, I also do believe that it would be good that everybody knew how to play both sides. So you have more of an option to choose your partner. If you're good at both
Mhm.
sides or know like the basics of both sides, you can always develop the game on either side. So I think that's important to stay kind of versatile with your own skills. But there are good and bad sides of having the same partner for long. I think when you play with someone for a very long time, you learn what they do. You know exactly what they're doing at every like step they take and these kind of things. So it's a very big benefit in that sense. But then again, if you start changing partners, you have to learn how to adapt. And that's something that doesn't take place all the time when you play with the same partner. So there are
Mhm.
good, like positive aspects of both. I think the most important thing when choosing a partner obviously depends on the country. Sometimes you don't have a lot of choices. So that's,
Right.
and you pick who doesn't have a partner at that point in time. If somebody, for instance, is sick or injured and can't make it. But I would say the mental aspect is very, very important. If you have someone who has mentally kind of a similar kind of a vibe or game kind of mindset, I think that's super important. So it's not always about like how talented someone might be or how good they might be like playing wise, because if for instance they're completely different mentally and you guys cannot connect on court, I think that's a huge risk. So it's something that should always be taken into play, not to always maybe choose the best player, but who's mentally fit for you, because that can actually, you guys can do a better job together than someone who's like completely on a different wavelength. Or again, another aspect to it, learn how to then kind of meet each other halfway. It's important to know, not always think like what the other person can bring, but what are you actually bringing on court? How do you adapt to that partner? So I think it's a lot about, yes, picking someone who's right for you, but how are you going to transform yourself to actually adapt to this new partner that you have? There's so many aspects to it. It's very difficult to like pinpoint exactly what, but you need to be ready to also learn new things, learn new ways of like talking to your partner, what works for them. You can't always take the same thing and like drag and drop it to the next place and the next place,
Mm.
because everybody needs something different on court. But to have that similar kind of mental drive or mental, like if you're very kind of aggressive or very like, okay, we need to win this, like, come on, come on. And then you have someone who's like very the opposite, it might be difficult, but again, you can make everything work if you really try. So
Well, I love the way that you say that, Sana, that you should also think about yourself and what are
yes, a lot.
you bringing in? What can you change? How can you change? It's not just about the other person all the time. And what about in communication itself? So let's say you have the same mindset. How do you determine the right calling structure? What kind of calls do you have? And the one that usually gets me, and that's my challenge, is figuring out when one's up, one's back.
Mhm. Um, do you mean with a new partner or in general with?
Well, in general, for you, what works for you? And then how do you make it work? Because maybe the other partner has a completely different approach.
That's something that needs to be discussed. I think in the beginning, if you take, for instance, a practice setup, I've noticed when I played with different players, some people don't like it when you actually tell them where the players stand. Some people might not listen even if you tell them. Some people need to be told where the players are standing, because they actually make a strategic choice on where they hit from what they hear from the other player. I think it's also something that you need to discuss openly. I don't think you can just like kind of just do whatever on court and then be like, okay, well, that person's not talking to me. Well, I'm not saying anything. I don't know. You need to discuss it openly. I think that's the main thing in everything when it comes to paddle and team sports anyways, like understanding the other person and understanding yourself also on court and then making it work. Because I really like when people, like my partner tells me where the players are standing, because I actually make a choice according to that. And I know majority of the people also do like it when they're told where players stand. So I think then if you're used to not saying anything, you need to kind of adapt to say something if your partner really needs that information. And you learn. It takes time to learn things, but if you set your mind to it, I think anyone can learn to communicate well on court.
It's important when you do have the ability and the desire to adjust your shot according to what the call
Yeah.
is to have the call early enough, and
Yes.
B, to be clear, right? Because I mean the challenge of one up, one back is, do you say A and B? Do you name the player, yours, mine? What call structure do you two use together?
Um, sometimes it's actually funny because some days I might mix up A and B, and then I'm like, apologies, like I actually said
Right.
the wrong person at
You
the
say you're so happening quickly, and I no, no, no,
like,
B something. Ah!
and then you notice like when you've said it, it's like, no, it's the other way around. But then you also don't want to say too much to confuse
Right.
your partner. So then you kind
Right.
of like, okay, let's see what happens. But yeah, that's I'm trying to think actually what we say. I think we say the side, yeah, like A or B. if we really know the opponent's names, like then we might say a name, but it's pretty clear, like both back, or if we say
Yeah.
like at front and finish, like then we know both are there. If we say then kind of like B came up, then we might know that A is in the back. So we do try to communicate very like concisely and clearly. But
Mm.
there are moments on court like I mix up A and B sides sometimes, and I'm like, what am I even like? Why? It's simple. It's A and B, and then you're
No,
just
no,
like, no,
no, no.
it doesn't
Yeah.
always. So
It may be some sort of residue dyslexia, right? You know,
yeah.
comes out in the court. So in terms of your game, Saana, how would you describe your game now? You've been playing now for over 5 years now. And
Yes.
what kind of an animal, I like to ask, what kind of an animal are you on the paddle court?
Oh, that's a tricky question. Haven't thought of what kind of an animal I would be, but probably an animal that is pretty patient to some extent. I like to try to build the points to kind of get the easier shots. So to get that place where you can actually hit then, or my partner can hit like a winner. But I don't know what animal I would actually be. I think for me, an animal that is pretty like quick, strategic, can make points. Um, yeah. What would that kind of animal be? I don't know why I keep just thinking of a fish, but I wouldn't say fish is like any kind of animal that should be on a paddle court,
Right,
especially because
right,
it's
right.
on
Out of
land.
water, out of water. But you know,
Yeah,
funny how the mind works, right?
yeah.
What's your favorite shot?
My favorite shot, I would say, is probably I like to hit chiquitas. I think is my favorite shot. Not saying I'm good at them, but I do like them because I feel like they kind of bring the possibility of going forward. If you they can even go past the player on the other side. So if you have a good chiquita, I think it's a nice like shot. When you make the chiquita, it feels good. I would say that one. Not saying I'm good at it, but it's my favorite shot. Like
Right.
to
And do you play it off the fore and the backhand, or just one side mostly?
mainly the forehand and kind of like a
Me
cross
too.
court angle. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's probably like one of the shots that when it works, it's always like a nice feeling. Yeah.
Indeed. What about the shot you're trying to improve on?
I would say the main one I would want to now improve is my return. I think the return is something that is super important because it kind of sets the whole point up
Mm.
in the beginning of the point. And if your return is bad, then if you give an easy ball to the opponents, they might already start like making points pretty easy. So I think the return is one thing I would want to work on and make it better. So whether it be a lob, chiquita, whatever I'm returning, to get more quality in my return, that's definitely
Well,
something that.
so I personally, let's talk about this a second because I tend to I tend to have a first default shot, which is a lob.
Mhm.
If I can, down the line. Depends on what side I'm playing and who I'm playing against, of course. But that's my sort of, I would like to be able to go for that. And I kind of decide on what I want to do ahead of time, especially as the game goes along. How do you approach the return? I mean, obviously you have different style
Mhm.
servers, but what's your approach and how are you going to look at improving your returns?
I think a lot of it depends also not only on what kind of I would like to hit, but who the opponent is. So if I know my opponent has a big smash or they have very good volleys or they move very close to the net, I adjust accordingly.
Mm.
But definitely I would like to have more like height on the lob. So something that I would want to implement. If I lob, either hide it so the opponent can't see it's coming, or then have enough height that you have the time to kind of set yourselves up with your partner on court before the next shot comes. Definitely that. And I do have some like if nothing's working, then it's like, okay, just hit to the middle. That's one
Yeah.
thing that I've always, if nothing works, if your return is just absolutely out of place on that day, hit to the middle or lob to the middle. Just make sure you kind of bring in those what do you call those kind of margins? Yeah. So not making mistakes if your
Mm.
return is like just not working. So that's probably something I default to. Otherwise, I adjust according to the opponent.
I like that. One of the issues with paddle for me anyway, and I'm sharing is when I'm not feeling great, my touch isn't there. How do I what am I doing? What's the mental game that I work through? And so I just say, all right, I got to do my three basics.
Mhm.
Watch the ball,
Yes.
split step, and then try basic shots. So basic, like essentially lower risk type shots, go down the middle. Let's just get back to basics.
Yes.
And so, but the eyes and, eye on the ball, watch it onto your racket, split steps, get the feet going, and then hopefully things will come back. Is there a little routine that you use sort of when you're in that bad space?
Yes. Usually if the game is just not working on any given day. I do go back to very basic things. So try not too fancy shots, like not going for that angle Chiquita the whole time, or these kind of things. Trying to I think margins is the biggest one for me. Try to make sure that I bring in the margins, but also focus on the quality of my shot. Watching the ball is one thing I always think about. That's something that if you just think about watching the ball, it already shifts your focus from maybe thinking about like what's going wrong to just watching the ball. So that's already a thing. Um, Playing to the middle, but that's all about the margins again. So trying to think, and then just trying to be more consistent, making sure my legs are moving. A lot of the times, if your game's not going well, it could be because of your legs. You're standing
Yeah.
straight, you're not moving, you're not doing your split step, you're not going
Yeah.
forward. You kind of just become a statue. So that's one
Mm.
thing also to pay attention that I do pay attention to is my legs. And a lot of the times with my doubles partner, we're like, okay, let's like bend our knees now. Because if we're like making return mistakes, usually it's because we're not bending our knees. So we do
Excellent.
communicate this kind of stuff together a lot, especially if we're not having a good day. We try
Yeah.
to find the kind of tools to turn the game around. It's not always possible, but we at
Yeah.
least try to analyze together and see what could be done. And watching the ball is another thing we say to each other. So
Yeah. Well, it's good
yeah.
that, I mean, there's no whole notion of communication. And if
Mhm.
you have that open channel, you have some similar mindset and you're prepared because you know you want to win. I mean, that's the idea. If your partner screws up, she didn't mean to screw up. And how you manage the screw ups, roll your eyes, shrug your
Mm.
shoulders, all these little micro things, like almost microaggressions, to use a more modern term, can be very debilitating for that relationship. So this is the joy of paddle, and
Mhm.
I hopefully it brings you joy, Sanna, to play.
Yes.
Tell me what kind of, if do you have in your mind the funniest thing that's ever happened to you on a paddle court
Funniest
or around paddle?
funniest thing. Wow. I have to actually think. I'm not sure if there's been anything like very, very funny that comes to mind. I think a lot of the fun and joy is just in the very regular things, like having a good practice, having a good
Mm,
match, um, playing out in the sun. In Finland, we play indoors for so much of the time. So I think
sure.
it's the little things. There isn't one thing that kind of comes to mind that has been very funny or just like kind of one thing that stands out. I think it's the kind of the little things that
Yeah.
are fun for me and make it fun, the whole
It's the
process. So
little thing and the whole thing somehow,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Well, I one of my, and I pretend that these are like some hard and fast rules, but they're not. I always say there's rule number five, and rule number five is after a game in general, you've got to go off and have a beer with your other partners. That, I mean, of
Mhm.
course, if you drive, there are other legality issues, but in general, I feel like it's a very social game, and
Yes.
and we should maintain that afterwards. And is that something that's part of the Finnish way of playing paddle?
Yes, depends. It depends, of course. I would say a lot of the times you see people like stay after paddle if there's like a beer fountain or something where you can get drinks, food. So those kind of paddle centers, they definitely draw people to like just hang around there as well, like discuss with your opponents after the games and stuff like that. Practice. We do sometimes as well, and it's I think that's one of the biggest like tennis is also social, but it's not as social as paddle. A lot of people really like paddle because of the social element and aspect of
Mm,
it. So I think it is a lot fun of fun to kind of like I guess because there are four players on the court, so it's always like a kind of like a party once you're done. So you can get those friends from court and go do something, or just hang around after next to the court. You don't even need that beer fountain or a nice
yeah,
restaurant. You just hang around and sit and watch other people play. That's what
right.
happens a lot. I've noticed. You might stay and watch the next door court play, or talk to some other people, try to find new opponents and stuff like that. So the social aspect is really, really like a cool thing and a nice thing about paddle.
One of my observations is about paddle as opposed to tennis is that proximity with your opponents on the court.
Yes.
It makes it possible to talk. You're sometimes you're all forward the net, or much more frequently all forward the net than you will be in lawn tennis, backwards and forwards, and it feels that must help somehow as well as being Spanish. So you're go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that's definitely it. And I noticed I didn't play tennis for a while and I went on a tennis court and I was like, whoa, like had to shout to like the person on the other side. I'm like, you're so far away. Like I have to really shout. And it's like you don't kind of, that interaction isn't that often on a tennis court like that you get on a paddle court because everyone's at the net or very close in proximity. So there is a difference there, definitely.
And no doubt, right? So for someone who's played so much tennis and now paddle, clearly, I think in sports, there's life, and the things that happen off the court can impact you on the court, and the things that happen on the court can also bring you elements off the court. What kind of lessons, life lessons, do you think paddle has brought to you? And maybe, if it's possible, specifically different from lawn tennis. But in any event, what has paddle brought to you in the 5 years you've been playing, Sana?
Hmm. Well, there from both, I think it's easy. This is also kind of apparent for tennis, but I think from the losses you learn to kind of take those hits in life. I think, and vice versa. From the wins, you kind of learn how to celebrate like achievements. I guess. From paddle, maybe it's the kind of social aspect of sports, the team element of it. In tennis, you're very alone. In paddle, you're kind of with your teammates, and your opponents is a team. Your opponents are a team. So I think that more of the kind of playing as a team is definitely some lesson that I've learned from paddle and from work, because you work in a team usually, you barely work alone all of the time. So I think that that kind of team aspect is something that's come very strongly out of paddle. In tennis, you do play doubles as well, but it's more kind of a singles than doubles. The more like kind of emphasis I think is put on the singles side usually. So and doubles is fully kind of paddle is fully a double sport. So definitely the team element, I would say.
Hmm. And I don't suppose you represented Finland playing tennis, or did you?
What do you mean?
Did you represent Finland playing tennis in the Fed Cup or something like that?
I was in Fed Cup once. That was quite a long time ago, though.
All
I
right.
think we
So
were in Armenia. Yes,
tell us about your experience of playing for Finland at the European and World Championships.
in paddle.
Hmm.
I think it's well. I loved college tennis for the fact that it was a team sport. Okay, now I'm again mixing my words. What I meant like previously was that when you're on court, you're usually alone in tennis. In paddle, you're
Right.
together, so the team element.
Hmm.
But in college tennis, it was a team sport in that sense. You're alone, but you're in a team. Like everybody's wins add up to that team win. So it's similar when you go to like a European Championships or World Championships. In paddle, you're playing with that partner on court, but you're kind of team. You have usually like three doubles pairs who go on court. You all have to kind of win, cheer each other to get that win. So it's not enough that you win on court. You actually have to ensure that your teammates also win. So it's a lot of fun. I think the whole team aspect of sports in general brings kind of a bigger excitement to the
Mm.
whole kind of journey of the sport. So I definitely prefer playing as like this team where you're playing on court, but then you also have the teammates who need to succeed. It's more fun.
Last question for you, Sana, is when do you think we're going to have a finish, or what basic, or I'd love it for finish, but having a top finish player, when I say a top, top 20, top 10,
Mm.
how far away are we from having that, get rid of, or get bump off the Spanish, Argentinian, Brazilian hegemony? Oh, of course, there's the Portuguese lady as well, Sophia, who plays.
Well, let's say from the Finnish players, we're very far away from the top. I think there's a huge jump, even like top 50 or top 40 versus top 10, top 20. There is a difference in level, I would say. So I think we're very far in that sense, because I know when I play, for instance, I played against a few top 10 players, a few top 20 and top 30, and it has been very difficult. It might not look that way from the outside, but when you're on court, they do so many different things that make you kind of completely off balance. You don't see it on the outside, but when you are on court, you feel it. So I think that is something that is still missing a lot from Finland's paddle, because the kind of element of, or kind of skill of making someone feel so unbalanced on court is what the pros do. They choose their shots so specifically. They're able to be in a bad position themselves and still make a shot that makes their opponent be in a completely horrible position. And I think that's something that is definitely still missing from paddle in Finland. So learning how to kind of really strategically make your opponent completely off balance. And it will take years, I guess, still, hopefully sooner than later, that somebody comes and knocks the Spanish players out the way, because in Finland there aren't any players yet that have played from like childhood. And that's the difference, because in, I guess, the Spanish players, some of them have moved from tennis to paddle, but a lot of them have kind of grown with the
Pure,
sport.
pure paddle.
Pure paddle. And that's what makes a lot of the differences, I think, and why some of the countries are so ahead. Plus, of course, they probably practice with each other. So they learn, even if you moved from tennis to paddle, you're still practicing with those people. You learn those things faster than if you're kind of in your own culture, your own country culture. So it is possible that someone who hasn't played for that long could probably make it. Don't know when, no idea. But I think the more kind of likely scenario is that some of the juniors who are now playing will probably then be the ones who are knocking these top 20, top 10 players out of the way someday. But yeah, we'll take some time.
So, Sana, then will you be going to Qatar for the World Championships?
I think the next one that's coming up, if I get chosen to the team, of course, is in Italy, European Championships
Oh, right,
in
right.
July. Qatar, I'm not sure. I think the Finnish team needs to qualify, and I think Qatar is like the main event for World
I see.
Championships. And I'm
Right.
not entirely sure if these European Championships in Italy have kind of a linkage to that. I'm not sure. We'll find out. It's not always
Excellent.
that clear to me because there's like the FIP, the FEPA, and all these different kind of organizations. So I'm not like completely um, aware of how it all works. But let's see.
Sana, hey, it's been a great to have you on the Joy of Paddle. Do you have a last word for people who are out there listening to you to get inspired for or enjoy more paddle?
I think find a good partner, find someone who is fun to play with. Play with different kinds of players, so you kind of learn different playing styles and just have fun. I think always like giving it your all on court is just fun. Like give it your all and enjoy paddle. That's all I have to say.
Excellent, Sana. It's been a tremendous pleasure. I hope one day our paths will cross, if not on a paddle court, just in a hotel or an airport. Let us have fun and keep on enjoying your paddle. Sana, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. This was fun.